And my hot take is that introversion is actually a superpower for product managers. As introverts, we tend to, because we are really good listeners, and if we're honest, people like to be listened to. Connection is about listening to people and understanding people. And I think introverts have that really good ability to just let people be themselves, let people speak. There's people who want to speak, but sometimes being able to get the right questions to get to the right information is equally as important.
Hello and welcome to another episode of One Night in Product, Hot Takes edition, where I speak to one person about one thing, get straight to the point and find out what's on their mind. Now, if you've got something on your mind, why not head over to onenightinproduct.com/hot, where you can find a time, book a slot with me, we can have a chat and share your opinions with the world. In any case, do remember to head over to onenightinproduct.com, where you can find all my past episodes, as well as find links to subscribe to the podcast and all your favourite podcast apps, or find us on YouTube, and you can make sure you never miss another episode again. Anyway, enough of me. Let's get straight to Grace Yusuff's hot take. All right, so in front of me, I can see a purple spectacular scene, very well lit and putting my own lights to shame. And I can also see a person in front of me, so I'm going to throw straight over to you and ask you what your name is, where you're based, what it is you do, and most importantly, what's your hot take?
Perfect. Well, thank you. My name is Grace. I'm based in London. I am an innovation and engagement product manager, and my hot take is that introversion is actually a superpower for product managers.
All right, well, I saw you give a talk about this the other day, a couple of weeks ago in London.
Yeah.
So I obviously know some of the things that you're going to say, but we didn't maybe go into all of the things. So I want to kind of take this from the top, just obviously for the listeners here that weren't lucky enough to be there. I'm going to say, go out on a limb first and say that you would therefore classify yourself as an introvert.
Yes, I am what they call the extroverted introvert, and that I can put it on for a show, but realistically, social encounters and talking for long periods of time does completely drain me. I mean, not to say that I don't enjoy it, but it can definitely be a task.
But, and you know, by the way, we were chatting just before we started recording about, and I definitely empathize with that. That's something that I feel a lot as well. This idea that you go out, you can turn it on, you can, do the jazz hands or whatever, and then like on the way home, you're just like, because it's just taken so much out of you. How often do you feel at the end of the day versus like being able to take it in your stride? Because that could be exhausting, right? Is that something that you feel is exhausting all of the time, or just like for those big occasions when it comes up?
I think it's mostly the big occasions. It's the times where typically when I have to either give like a company presentation or I'm the one having to explain things to stakeholders and typically have to buy them in. But I find when I'm in loads of meetings, like back-to-back meetings, but I'm the one having to kind of take all the information in, come up with ideas, that's less strenuous. But when I'm the one having to present the ideas and make everyone and get all the stakeholder buy-in, that can sometimes be quite exhausting.
Oh, here. But one might then go out on a limb and say that given, product management, at least in some companies, not all, like in some companies, it's kind of a delivery function, but in companies that are quote unquote doing proper product management, there's a lot of, like you say, there's meetings, there's storytelling, there's getting up in front of the entire company to say all the things. There's obviously speaking to users, there's doing user interviews. There's all these things that you might sit there, or one might sit there and think, well, that's not the sort of thing that an introvert would want to even do. Like, why would they want to do that? Why wouldn't they just go and do what the developers do and put a big set of noise-cancelling headphones on and go and develop some stuff? So what was it that attracted you to product management as an introvert yourself, someone that maybe wasn't naturally good at this stuff? Like, what was it that made you think, yeah, that's the thing I want to do?
Actually, to be honest, when I first got introduced to the idea of being a product manager, I completely said no. Everything that I'd known about product
you should
managers,
have stuck to it. Run away.
I was like, absolutely not. This is not for me. Everything that I know about product managers and the ones that I work with, it was just so much talking and so much negotiating and stakeholder management. And like you said, they're kind of just being on and speaking to people all the time. So I was automatically like, absolutely not. This is not for me. But I had the opportunity to kind of listen in on a user call. And I think that just really changed it for me. Yes, the PM was speaking, and it is our role to kind of guide user interviews, but the power came from actually listening to what the user was saying. And it was finding the gaps in not what they were saying, but what they weren't saying. It was the frustration. It was it was all of the non-verbal things that I think introverts are really good at noticing that I just enjoyed about it. And I came away from that experience like, okay, maybe I've been won over to the world of product because I really love the problem solving side of it. So yes, begrudgingly, I joined the product function. And to be honest, I have loved it ever since.
Well, no, that's, yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely how, I mean, I started out in tech and then sort of moved in because I started to enjoy more talking about, why we were doing the things and as you say, problem solving and understanding and all of that stuff. But, one person might sit there listening to this and say, well, okay, as an introvert, you've decided you want to go into this for the reasons you just described. But that then involves you kind of trying to get rid of the introversion so that you can be good at it. But you classified introversion as a superpower. Now, you touched on a little bit about the listening and kind of reading between the lines, but what do you specifically mean above and beyond that? Like, why is it a superpower to be embraced rather than like a demon to be overcome?
Because I think as introverts, we tend to, because we are really good listeners, and if we're honest, people like to be listened to. Like, I think it's there's always the, like, I love good speakers, but truly I think connection is about listening to people and understanding people. And I think introverts have that really good ability to just let people be themselves, let people speak. And when you are in a space where you're trying to build products for people that you don't necessarily know, like I don't know my customers that much. I only have maybe an hour a week or an hour every other month to speak to them. So I have to be able to open the floor and just let them be as comfortable as possible. And I think that is what introverts can do. We can provide that space for people to just speak and express how they feel, sometimes not related to the product, but then they get there eventually. So that is what I believe product managers, introverted product managers have a superpower with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This idea of like, being able to listen and empathize and, as you say, kind of hang back a little bit and kind of, listen to what they're really saying. And, that's something that probably, we all need to, we need to keep ourselves honest with that, right? Like we need to not just go in there and bloviate over people and just tell them our view of the world.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you can probably sit there and say, like, that's one angle. Like, as a product manager, you're there doing those things when you're out speaking to users and doing interviews and empathizing with people. But they're not the only people that you have to talk to in product. There's also a lot of managing stakeholders within the company, and there's also crucially managing up as well. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that there's a lot of alpha, let's say males, because they normally are, alpha males at the top of an organization. There are lots of people that seem to get a lot of airtime because of the volume of their voices. And there's this kind of, I don't want to say cliche because it makes it sound bad, but there's kind of there is a cliche that, for example, someone that is more introverted or maybe someone that's not of that image struggles, for example, to get heard. So is that something that you as an introvert have managed to kind of work out a way to kind of make sure that you're not just overridden, or is that a problem that continues? Like, how does that go for you?
Yeah, I think I'm not going to lie and say that, you're not going to get times where you're going to have to speak and you're going to have to kind of overcome that introversion. It is part of the role. But one thing I have learned, and something that I feel like I've kind of mastered, if I can say that, is the art of asking really good questions. It's not because there's people who want to speak, but sometimes being able to get the right questions to get to the right information is equally as important. Like I do love to talk, but I'm probably not the person who's going to be spending 20 minutes in a meeting just going on and on and on. I'm just not that. But what I am is the person who can listen to what this person is saying and being like, oh wait, actually you said that the users are kind of doing this. Like, how did we come to that conclusion? And then you let them explain. And then they mention something else and you're just like, well, I'm not really quite sure. Like, what do you mean by that? And just as equally, you've made valuable contributions because you're able to break down what this person or what the conversation is and what the problems are, just as well as the person who's explaining and giving all the information. And I think that aspect of product management is sometimes overlooked when we are talking about communication. Communication is, yes, being able to say things to people, but it's also being able to ask really good questions. And that for me, I've found has been a really good way for me to still bring value, even though I consider myself quite introverted.
But continuing on that topic of like, there being people in the room that may be almost, inevitably defer to the more confident sounding people in the room. Like, again, the kind of living up to the cliche. I guess one of the benefits of the empathy that you're talking about is that you can also try and identify those people yourself as well, like people in the room that maybe you see aren't speaking up, or people in the room that maybe themselves aren't confident to do some of the things that you've done. Have you worked out a way, in your role and in meetings that you're in to try and, either encourage those people to speak up in the first place if maybe they've not gone on the journey yet, but also to encourage, again, the alphas in the room to pipe down a little bit without telling them to shut up? Like, is there any way that you've worked out to kind of surf that line so that everyone's getting kind of equal representation?
It's very rare that I plan a meeting where people are kind of just talking. Usually I do take into account, mainly for myself, that there's going to be people who have a lot more to bring to the table, just words wise than others. So this is where I use tools like Miro or Figma, where I just get everyone to write their ideas down. Like I pose a question, guys, we're looking at user engagement, it's gone down by 3%, or, we're launching this feature and, on and on and on. And then you're able to get the people who would probably spend 10 minutes explaining 3 points to narrow it down into a sticky note. But also you get the people who, probably don't want to say as much to also put the ideas. And then you can kind of go, oh, someone said this. And then you point at that person and then you give them time to speak. So it's rare that I have a meeting where people are just speaking. I do try to structure it. So one, it keeps it quite short. It's on a sticky note. If you can't fit it on a sticky note, then it's probably another meeting or something that we can do later. So that's one way that I try and make it easy for everyone to speak as well. And, once you group things together, you can kind of be like, oh, well, is there anything that anyone else wants to say? Any final points? Or, like Alex, you haven't kind of said anything about this, but I know you had an interesting idea. And this is also where that empathy and connection comes in place, because I can have a conversation about something that we're going to talk about in a meeting outside with maybe an introverted person. And they could say 20 million really great ideas. But I know that when I go into that meeting, they may not want to say all of that. But I can be like, hey, Alex, you mentioned X, Y, and Z when we were speaking on a Zoom call or in our one-to-one or on the hallway. Like, could you expand on that? Because I think this would be really good here. So it is balancing that. I think, there's a lot of balancing you have to do. But I think it's really important to make sure everyone does feel heard.
No, absolutely. I think it is important. It kind of speaks a lot then to sort of the preparation that you want to do and kind of doing some of your fact finding up front as well. But I guess also another way to look at it is the potential for, kind of in that vein, like asynchronous communication as well. Like, is that something that you think is a good way to maybe, apart from this kind of, this meeting could have been an email type energy, but like just in general, this idea that there's a lot of power to be had, especially if we want to be inclusive and get all the different types of people that have different types of reasons for not speaking up, like the way that you can maybe do some pre-work asynchronously. Is that something that you feel is like a valuable thing to do?
Yes, pre-reads and agendas. While I'm not the one to write a very detailed agenda, I am very guilty of that. I at least like to know, I at least like to let people know what they're coming to talk about. Like, I don't like, random meetings and it's just meeting and no explanation of what we're actually going to be talking about for the 2 hours that you've taken from my calendar. So I am quite courteous in that. I do like to outline, we'll be discussing this. Hey, if you have any ideas that you want to shoot to me before then, feel free. I'd be like, oh, and then someone will message me and be like, oh, I have this great idea about this. I was exploring this. And I'm like, yeah, do you know what? Maybe put it on the Miro board early, or I'll keep it in mind and then we can bring up on the conversation when it comes to that time.
No, absolutely. I think also that it's interesting, this idea that obviously I understand why you got into product. You've kind of explained what it was that attracted you to it. And obviously you looked at it and you were like, yeah, sure. Like, no, that's not the kind of thing that I want to do. And then you've gotten into it and you're doing some of the things that you say, that you've been doing. But like, if someone else is listening to this, like, someone else say, yeah, I'm kind of introverted too. I don't really fancy, I'm not very good at some of these things. And like, some of the things that Grace is saying, they sound good in theory, but like, maybe I'm not too good at that either. Like, I guess there's this kind of muscle building exercise going on there where you start to try some of these things out. So is there like a 1, 2, 3 step plan that you recommend if someone's sitting there? Because I know you're talking about this to people, you're giving talks and so I'm assuming you want to help other people go on that journey too. So is there like a 1, 2, 3 sort of ABC step plan that you recommend people start sort of dipping their toe in the water?
That's a good question. So I'll probably start with, as a product manager, you are the user advocate. If you can do that, you can be a product manager. So then when we talk about how you fit your introverted or extroverted personality into that, you do what works for you. Some people are really good at summarizing things in emails, other people voice messages, other people create Loom videos, which was something that, not that I'm going to try, but I found really interesting. But communication doesn't have to be standardized. It's whatever gets the message across when you're talking to stakeholders, whether that be internal or external. So I just always tell people, if you're good at what the core job is, find a way that works for you and everyone will be receptive to it. I'm not like a massive speaker in meetings most of the times, but I'm a really good question asker. So now I know that when my team or when my manager comes to me and he just throws ideas, he knows I'm the one that's going to be like, you said this, why is that? You mentioned this, how's that? Or why don't we think about this? And I'm really good at connecting the dots. I know that that's my strength as a product manager. So I'm hesitant to give a 1, 2, 3 because I think when we do that, we miss out that magical part of what makes you a really good product manager. So I guess that's my very long answer to, I don't actually have a 1, 2, 3, but I always tell people, like, if you can do the core job, you are a product manager. Whatever way you do it is your way of doing it. That is your unique strength.
All right, but as discussed, you've been going out speaking about this now and again. I saw you at the Now Next product event a few weeks back, and you gave the lightning talk there. I'm assuming you're doing other talks or trying to give other other avenues to get this message out there. And again, that's not a very introverted thing to do in some ways. So, like, what was it then? Like, was there a tipping point where you sat there and was like, or stood there, or whatever you were doing, and were like, yeah, I need to get this message out, like based on what you've experienced? Was there a happening that made you want to go and do that, or did it kind of just happen organically? Like, what was it that started that off?
Yeah, so I'm an early careers mentor. So I tutor a lot of university students, or people who are really early in their career, who are super interested in getting either pivoting into tech role or just pivoting into product management. And the one thing that they ask me is, product managers have to give meetings and presentations. And like, I'm not a confident public speaker, or I don't like speaking in front of people, or all these things about the communication and stakeholder part of it. And it's a question that I'm always having to battle down. I'm just like, yes, you have to do it, but find a way that works for you. Like when you go to university and you choose your module, some are heavy on essays, some are heavy on exams. You pick what works for you and you do what will make you shine, and you go forward with that. So it was a question that I was always getting, amongst other things about how to get into tech and how to be a product manager. But I would see some of these really brilliant students who just had like such sharp minds say, oh, I don't want to go into product management because I'm scared of speaking, or I'm just like, you're speaking to me. You are having this conversation right now. I do think it comes a lot from how other people perceive, particularly senior people. You're always just like, oh, I don't want to say something silly, or I don't want to embarrass myself, and all of these different things. So I was kind of just like, I kind of got fed up for it, even though I know that I am guilty of the same things. I was just like, I need to tell people that, like, no, your introversion is a superpower. Whether you can do A, B, and C, as long as you can do the core of your software engineering role, or your product manager role, or your data analyst role, you are that role. Like, don't allow other people's preconceived ideas of what it is to be success stop you from being a new version of success. I think fear of failing is what's stopping people from wanting to be like a new version of success. And yeah, so that was one of the main reasons I kind of talk about the different skills that you can develop and that you need in tech and all these other things, just to debunk some of the myths out there.
It sounds like there's a little bit of kind of the concept of imposter syndrome in there as well. Like, obviously this idea that, oh God, like, I'm not going to be good enough for that. Like, I can't do that. And all of the things that people struggle with on a daily basis. Do you think that imposter syndrome and kind of introversion come hand in hand, or do you think that they're just two separate things that people suffer from simultaneously, but like it's completely kind of irrelevant, like whether they have both or one of them, like they could have either or neither or one?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't think unfortunately, imposter syndrome has no type. It attacks everybody and anybody at any stage of career, at any personality. Truly, it does. But I think with introverts, it's kind of like that being quiet aspect that makes you feel a little bit like, oh, like I don't even want to speak, or I don't want to try and attempt, because you already feel like, you're in your own bubble. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's completely isolated to introverts. It definitely it attacks everyone. It has no mercy on who it goes for. But yeah, imposter syndrome is a really tough one to crack, because it's you fighting you. And ultimately, no matter how many times you do it, like I always give a presentation like once a week, but every time I do it, I'm just like, oh my goodness, I'm going to say something silly, or I'm going to embarrass myself. And afterwards, and then it's over with. I'm just like, oh, that went well. So a lot of the time I tell people that you're going to just have to get to the other side of it. Like, just get to the other side of it. And then you'll realize that the more and more you do it, hopefully it gets easier.
Well, fingers crossed. I do have to ask though, like you said that introversion is a superpower. Does that mean that extroverts are the supervillains and that we have to defeat them?
No. That was actually, I remember when I was creating my presentation and I added the disclaimer slide, I was just like, I am not saying extroverts are the villains here. But I think when we look at a lot of, and even when you look at successful people outside of tech, you see a lot of extroverted people, people who are really confident and who are really good at speaking. And particularly when you're early in your career and you don't have any of those skills, you feel like, oh, I'm just not that person. But you're looking at their personality and thinking that that's what makes their profession. But the profession is different from their personality. Being a product manager doesn't necessarily mean, like, isn't strongly correlated to being extroverted. Being a product manager is just being a product manager. And there's different ways of doing that successfully. So I don't think extroverts are the villain. It can be difficult working with an extroverted person as an introvert. But that's why I love all of these different HR initiatives where you do your INTJ or your personality type. So everyone knows kind of what they're going on. And one thing that my manager's being super, super great with is he knows that he's super extroverted. But from having these conversations and also understanding our personality types, he'll also defer to me or other people, because he knows that he can talk for hours, and he's always said it. So he always take the time to be like, okay, what do you think? And how does this work? And I think that's the mark of a really good leader and extrovert as well. Someone who recognizes that, okay, I've probably said 100 words in a minute. Let me pass it on to someone else.
See, there's hope for us all yet.
There is.
Now, it might seem strange given that we're talking about introversion, but if people want to come and find you after this and talk to you about some of this stuff, where can they come and do that?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm always accepting messages from people who are interested in getting into tech or who just have questions in general. Like, I make a habit of trying to email or LinkedIn one person a month for a call just to expand my network. So I'm always very much welcome for that as well. So if you have any questions or just want any advice on how to get into the world of tech, then definitely shoot me a LinkedIn.
Well, I'll link that into the show notes, and hopefully you'll get a few introverts and maybe even some extroverts heading in your direction and, making some noise or not, depending on their proclivities. But all I can do for now is thank you very much for your hot take.
Thank you.